Okay, good morning, everyone. So, as we say, we are going to have a review for today. Because Monday we are going to have our third midterm, right? So, I sent you an email in the morning, so that just give you everyone a copy of these sample tests, right? So, the exams are going to be similar, all right? Make sure you have time to go through all the questions, but in class, I'm going to go through one by one. Let's start with the first one. Okay. Um, with the increase in the productivity, the short-run aggregate supply curve. Okay. So the productivity, so by the way, so the short-run aggregate supply curve, probably you can look at this diagram. Right. So if there is a productivity gain, and then so the short-run aggregate supply will increase. So that's going to shift the curve rightward. Right? So the answer is D. Now go to the second one. The quantity of real GDP supplied, okay, it's quantity supplied, depend on, let's go one by one, price level, the unemployment rate, the quantity government expenditure, and the good and the service. So that's not true, right? Because so this is the supply, right? So supply won't depend on the quantity of government expenditure, right? B, quantity of labor, quantity of capital, and state of technology. Okay, so actually B is correct. All right, so this is question 2. Now let's go to question 3. In the above figure, the economy is at point A. So here, so this is where we are for the economy. Okay, so the money wage falls by 10%. If the price level is constant, firm will be willing to supply output equal to, okay. So now first find out what happened in point A. In point A, the price level is 110. Y is 16, right? So this is point A. So because we look at here and here. So this is point A. Now the question says at point A, price is constant. Okay? But wage falls by, the wage falls by 10%. Right? So nothing else happens. This is going to lead to short-run aggregate supply to increase, right? Because wage decline. Okay, and then so the curve will shift to the right. Okay, and then so the economy is going to produce more than 16. Okay. So you might want to draw a aggregate demand. Okay, so this aggregate demand. Now the wage falls, and then this curve will shift to the right. So you can see it's going to cross with a new dot here, right? So compare with A, and then we knew what happens. So the quantity will increase. Okay, so this question 3. Now we go to 4. The short-run aggregate supply curve shift leftward. Okay, so short-run aggregate supply shift leftward, meaning there's a decline. Right, decline in aggregate supply. A, money wage rate increase. So that's going to increase the cost, right? Wage increase leads to cost increase. So A is correct. Now let's look at B. General level of technology advance. So these are actually is going to lead to an increase in supply. right? So B is not correct, opposite. C, price level increase. Price level increase won't change the supply curve. So we may move along the supply, right? So C is not correct. D, available of the on-the-job training expand to all workers. Okay. So these availability of on-the-job training, so actually, so this problem is going to similar to technology advance. So that's going to improve the productivity of the worker. So that should shift the supply curve to the right instead of left. So D is not correct. So A is correct. Now we go to question 5. People expect their income will decrease next year as a result. Okay? So their income decrease. Okay? So expectation, right? So their income decrease. So we need to identify. So usually this causes the aggregate demand to change, right? If we expect our income decrease next year, and then aggregate demand will decrease. So aggregate demand decrease means the curve will shift to left, right? So now, so we can easily find out answer D, option D is correct. Okay. Make sure you understand what other things can cause a similar outcome, right? So here, so they expect their income to decrease. And maybe we can think about if there's a housing market collapse, okay? Or if there's a stock market crash. So that's going to generate a similar pattern. Okay. Now go to question 6. An increase in aggregate demand is shown by, so shown by the curve is shift, right? The curve shift to which direction if there's an increase? So we can draw this. Oh, sorry, this is supply. So this is demand, aggregate demand, right? So if increase means the same price, you're going to demand more, so it must be a rightward shift, right? So the answer is D. Now we move to next questions. Question 7. The data in the above table indicate that when the price level is 100. So now let's look at this table. Price level at 100. Okay, and so we have aggregate demand of 11. We have real GDP of 9 and a potential GDP of 10. Okay, so basically this is what it's going to look like. Okay, so this aggregate demand, short run aggregate supply. Price 100, so demand exceeds the supply. So the problem is going to look like here. So this is 100. This is 9. And this is going to be 11. Potential GDP, where's potential GDP? Right, so potential GDP is going to be 10, so probably it's going to be here somewhere, right? So now this question asks you what happened next. First, let's look at A. The unemployment rate is at its equilibrium level. Certainly it's not, right? So we produce less than we potentially can produce, meaning the unemployment rate is high. B, inventory rise and the price level falls. That's not occurring, right? Because right now, actually, so the demand exceeds supply. So the inventory will fall instead of rise, right? So now go to C. The inventory falls, that's correct, and the price level rise. That is also correct, right? Because essentially right now, so the demand exceeds supply, okay? And the D, the economy is in the long run equilibrium. That's not correct, okay? So now we go to question 8. If an increase in household disposable income from 10,000 to 12 boosts its consumption from 8,000 to 9,000. And so this means we can calculate MPC, marginal propensity to consume, equal to, so 9,000 minus 8,000 divided by 12 minus 10,000, right? And this is going to give us a 0.5, right? So this is a marginal propensity to consume. Now let's look at one by one. A, slope of the consumption function is 0.5. The slope of the consumption function equal to MPC. So A is correct. Now let's look at B. Households is this saving. So actually no, right? So their income increased by 2,000, but they only spend additional 1,000, meaning so they save a fraction. C, slope of the consumption function is 1,000. That's not correct. D, slope of the consumption function is 0.2. That's not correct. Okay. So this is question 8. Now we look at question 9. A movement along the consumption function to higher level of consumption expenditure arises because, right? So now we need to draw the line. So this is consumption function. On the horizontal line is your disposable income. On the vertical line is your consumption. So we move along this line. And clearly this is caused by disposable income change, right? But now because we move to a higher level of consumption, means we move to this direction. Okay, so the answer is D. Now let's look at other options. A, the level of desired saving rise. So actually, so the level of desired saving rise implies MP is increase. And that means MPC is going to decrease. And it means the consumption function becomes flatter. Okay, so this is what A means. Now B, the level of disposable income decrease, and then we move to other direction. You're going to have a lower consumption expenditure. C, households wealth rise. So that's going to move up the consumption function. Okay, so this is question 9. Now we go to question 10. In the above figure, if real GDP is below 15 trillion, so here, inventory will be, okay, so this is aggregate expenditure model. So say for example, so if we are at here 10, so that's below 15. And then, so expenditure here, expenditure exceeds your real GDP, right? So that means the inventory will be below target level, right? Because you're going to run out of your inventory quickly because the demand exceeds your real GDP. Okay, so the inventory will be below target level, and the firm will increase production, right? So question 10, C is the obvious answer. Okay, so now we move to next one. Okay. So in the above table, C is consumption expenditure, I is investment, G is government expenditure, X is export, and M is import. All entries are in dollars. What is the equilibrium expenditure? Okay. So first of all, you need to identify what is this table is about. Actually, so this is an extension of what we discussed in the class for the aggregate expenditure model, right? So in the aggregate expenditure model, we say aggregate plan the aggregate expenditure equal to disposable income. Then so we are in equilibrium or equilibrium expenditure. And so in the class, we said aggregate expenditure plan equal to C plus I plan. Now here we just expand this by looking at C plus I planned plus G plus X minus M equal to Y. So now we consider these three terms. All right, and if we look at this table, you can find out, so I is independent of income or is fixed. And G is also independent of income, is fixed. Okay? And so X is independent. Okay? So the only things increase or change with income, like consumption, is import. But because this is very intuitive, because import essentially is just import good for us to consume. So certainly that's going to increase with income, right? So now once you understand these, we need to find out our role such that the number inside this big bracket equal to the number on the right hand side. Okay, so the answer is actually A. So let's just verify. Okay, this column. Okay, so 375 plus 25, that's 400. 400 plus 95, 495. Plus 10, that is 505. Minus 5, that is 500. Right? So you add these 4 minus these items equal to your real GDP. All right? So that's how we calculate equilibrium expenditure. Remember, this is expenditure income model. Okay? So now we go to question 12. If MPC increase from 0.75 to 0.80, and there are no income tax for import. Okay? Now we go to one by one. A, the multiplier becomes larger. So actually multiplier equal to 1 over 1 minus MPC. So the MPC increase means this term is going to decrease, and then the entire term is going to increase. So A is correct. Now let's look at B. The slope of consumption function becomes smaller. So MPC, it gives us the slope of the consumption function. So hence the slope getting larger instead of smaller. So B is not correct. C, the multiplier becomes smaller. We just calculated, it becomes larger. And D, the slope of the saving function becomes larger. So even though we haven't explicitly talked about saving function, but so you should realize savings what is just inverse of consumption. Why? Because any penny you earn, either you consume or you save. Right? So as we just said, so if the slope of the consumption becomes larger due to an increase in MPC, that means the MPS will decrease. And then your saving function becomes, or the slope of the saving function will become smaller. Right? So this is 12. Okay. So now we look at next one. If investment decrease, the aggregate expenditure curve. So we have drawn this curve before, no? So this aggregate expenditure curve. The aggregate expenditure curve in the class is C plus I planned. So if the investment decrease, and then so the curve will shift up. right? And so this, now there are two parts. One is the regarding to aggregate expenditure curve. Okay, so it's shift down, but then so this question also asks you what happened to aggregate demand. Okay, so how we know the impact on aggregate demand? So remember, so from here, so you can find out this one, right? So the investment decrease, the curve shift down, and then the equilibrium income or equilibrium expenditure will decrease. Okay, but this is a given price, so that implies our aggregate demand curve will shift down, right? Because the same price level, but now we have lower expenditure. Okay, so the answer is C. So now we go to 14. The AASAD model studies the relationship between, let's go one by one. A, nominal GDP and inflation. That's not correct. B, the price level and unemployment. That's not correct. C, unemployment and real GDP. No. The last one is correct. The price level and real GDP. Okay. So 15. In a change to immigration policy during 2012, people younger than 30 who came to the United States before the age of 16 posed no criminal and or security threat and were successful students or served in the military can get a 2-year deferral from deportation. Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano said, according to CNN. So if many of these immigrants had previously been afraid to work, now as a result of being able to work legally. So now this question asks you how this policy change affects our economy. Let's go one by one. Okay. A, neither the short run nor the long run supply curve shift. So that's not correct. Actually, so here, so we are going to see an increase in labor supply, right? So how we know that is because, so from the last sentence, there are many immigrants who were afraid to work before. Now they may be able to work legally. So that is going to encourage them to looking for job. So the labor supply will increase. Okay? So actually the answer is, for these questions, the answer is D. Both the short run and the long run aggregate supply curve shift rightward. Okay? So essentially because the labor supply will increase. So that's going to drop down the wage. Okay? So that's going to provide some support to the aggregate supply. Now we go to 16. Which of the following occurs while moving along a short-run aggregate supply curve? Okay. Let's go one by one. A, the price level changes and the money wage is constant. Okay. So actually this is correct, right? So the price level change, then so we are going to move along this curve. And so the money wage is constant. So that just means there's no force to shift the curve to the left or to the right. Okay. So B, neither the price level nor the money wage rate change. If that's the case, and then so we won't move along the curve either. C, the money wage and the price level change by same percentage. So that's going to cause we move along the curve and we shift the curve at the same time. Okay. So now the last one, if the money wage change, the price level is constant. So that's going to cause a shift of the curve, and then so we are going to stay on the same position of the curve or in a parallel position. Okay, so now go to 17. The long-run aggregate supply curve is because along it, as price rise, the money rate. So this asks us about long-run aggregate long-run aggregate supply. How would that affect, or how would that respond to price change? So we already knew from the class, long-run aggregate supply is independent of the price level. So this curve will be vertical. Okay, so and when price rise, the money wage eventually will rise. But in the short run, price rise, wage is fixed, so the profit of the business will increase. So that leads to aggregate supply. In the short run, aggregate supply will increase. But in the long run, so there's going to have an adjustment. Wage will increase. Profit will return to the original level, implies the aggregate supply is fixed if there's a price change. Right? So this is the difference between short run aggregate supply and a long run aggregate supply. Okay, so answer is B. Now we go to 18. Other things equal along the aggregate demand curve. The higher level price level is associated with, now let's go one by one. Okay, a decrease in the quantity of real GDP demanded. Okay, so this is correct. Okay, so essentially they just ask us the aggregate demand curve. Right? Okay. All right, so I'm going to give you a 5 minutes break, and then after that, so we are going to continue our discussion for the review question.